Hello, hello, and welcome this evening, my friends, to Rewild the Night, where I am going to share with you functional strategies to support sleep. So, whether you're struggling to fall asleep, stay asleep, or some combination of the two, we're going to dive into why that's happening and also what you can do from a natural perspective to rebalance your system and get dreamy sleep every night. Before we do, my name is Dr. Chelsea Eilts. I go by Hermione ND on YouTube, where I alchemize ancient wisdom with cutting edge health sciences so that you can transform your health and re inspire your life. So, my friends, before we dive in, I wanted to share a little hands on experiential thing with you. For those of you attending live, hello and welcome. I am so pleased to have you here. Please, by all means, as we go along here, feel free to share in the chat any specific takeaways you're hoping to have, any issues maybe you've been struggling with that you haven't quite found answers to. And I hope to get to all of those during the course of our discussion today. And if we get to the end and there is time, I will certainly offer Q&A to answer any burning questions that you might have. So when we're diving in, a couple experiential things I wanted to offer. First is an evening mocktail. So whether you're trying to kind of like loosen your grip on an evening wine habit or a cannabis habit, or if you just want a little something tasty to help wind down the evening, I've created a little bit of a mocktail recipe that incorporates herbs specifically to help with sleep, kind of coming from different mechanisms of action. So regardless of what it is that's causing the struggle, there should be a little something in here for everyone. And I'm calling it Moon Nectar. So I start with, of course, a lovely glass. Aesthetics are important in my Torayan book. And then I've put together a little blend of herbal tea that you can brew ahead of time. And I'll share a recipe in the comments field below for you to find the herbs and all of that. This one is a combination of passion flower, which is both hypnotic, sleep inducing, and nervine, calms the fight or flight system. And I also combine something from a brand Organic India that's called Tulsi Rose. Tulsi being adaptogenic helps with stress response. And we'll dive into a little bit more about why that's helpful. But the combination is really pretty floral, a little bright, a little bit tart. So it's kind of lovely in that way. I'm going to go ahead and you can brew up a big batch beforehand, keep it in your fridge for the whole week. But I've got just what I need here for this evening. And it's warm, so I've got a little ice cube in there to cool that off. I also have an ounce of tart cherry juice here, which is a natural source of melatonin. So rather than, taking melatonin specifically, sometimes it's dosed a little too high for my liking in commercial products, but tart cherry is a natural source of that melatonin. So we'll add that in there for a nice fruity splash. I'll incorporate an herb. This is an herbal tincture stored in alcohol, but you can put this in your tea just as well if you have the whole herb of blue lotus. It's kind of nice for taking the edge off. An alternative to cannabis that has kind of a similar effect in terms of kind of your head change. And in tincture form, I'll just take one dropper full, put it into my brew. And then to finish this guy off, I've got just a little mineral water. So add some bubbles, some sparkle, makes it interesting. But then also minerals from a classical Chinese perspective are thought to speak directly to the kidney meridian, which helps with sleep. It really anchors the consciousness deep down into the body and helps the body to just surrender into sleep. So minerals can be really helpful from that kind of more traditional perspective in that way. And so we have our delicious moon nectar, safe for long-term use. Of course, if you're pregnant, breastfeeding, if you have pre-existing health conditions, you're on pharmaceuticals, definitely a case where you'd want to check with someone before starting any new herbs, just to make sure that they're appropriate for you. But tart, floral, fruity, delicious. If any herbs don't agree, you can totally swap out some of the herbal tea for just we'll go into more herbs later on in this presentation. So different things that you could play with and keep it interesting, you know? The more it's an art, a little creative project, the more that you'll get from it. And then one other thing before we dive in, I wanted to just offer a little bit of a somatic grounding practice. So no matter where you are, if you have a moment, as long as you're not driving a car and you're able to just really fully relax, I'll have you take a moment and just get settled in your seat. Maybe wiggle, shimmy, whatever you've got to do to feel really well supported, grounded, comfortable. Once you're there, just take a nice deep breath in through the nose and then let it out through the mouth, with or without sound. A couple more just like that, in through the nose and then out through the mouth, letting all tension go with the exhale. And once more, in through the nose and relaxing more deeply out through the mouth. Now a nice calm inhalation, exhalation through the nose. Just allowing your breath to deepen a little bit. Maybe start to bring it into the belly. And as you're settling in, just notice any area of tension. You can just relax even 10% more with each exhale. As you do this, I want you to slowly bring your awareness to the feeling of your body making contact with your chair or bed or whatever surface you're on. Just all the places where your back, your neck, your hips, your legs, your feet are being held. Noticing any qualities there. Maybe there's firmness or softness, warmth or coolness. Just scanning and seeing what you can feel as you tune into that space. And still keeping with a nice, relaxed breath. Start to bring your awareness to any area that just feels really good, feels really well supported, really comfortable. Let your mind rest there, breathing into that place. And a couple more breaths here. And as you're ready, slowly let your mind shift, just your awareness moving now to the feeling, just noticing the feeling of your clothes touching your skin. So tuning into the place where your shirt's touching your skin, maybe the weight of a coat or blanket, the feeling of your pants, shoes if you've got them. Again, just noticing qualities here. Maybe like texture, temperature, pressure. Nothing good or bad, just noticing what you feel. Maybe there's differences between sides, between top and bottom. Feeling into those spaces. And continue with your nice, deep, relaxed inhalations and exhalations. And lastly, here, I'm going to have you just bring your awareness to that space right underneath your skin, that space between your flesh and your skin, just scanning whatever you feel in there, moving from your top of your head, down your face, down the back of your head, the front of your throat, the back of your neck, your upper back, shoulders, down your arms, upper arm, elbow, forearm, hands. Feeling that space in your upper chest, down your chest to your upper belly, mid back, low back, lower belly. Feeling into that space in your pelvis, your hips, thighs, and then just down your legs. Doing a nice scan here. Shins, calves, ankles, and feet. Pay attention here to any places that just feel really spacious, really good. Maybe it's just super easy to hang out in one of those places because it feels so good. Let your mind rest there. We'll give 3 more deep breaths into this area. So good. As you're ready, let your peripheral awareness just take in the room, the space that you're in, remembering where you are, and slowly coming back to presence. Hi. So good. That's just a very basic guided somatic practice that is quite helpful before sleep. Oftentimes if our mind's moving into the future or the past, the easiest way to turn off that mental spiral is to focus on sensation in the body. So something like this is perfect to help with that. All right, so without further ado, I'm going to do a little screen share here and then dive into a little bit more on sleep. So here we are, rewilding the night, taking back our natural rhythms, our balance with nature and the elements to restore sleep. In this presentation, we are going to cover why sleep's so important. Why are we here? What is it that about sleep that's mandatory for physical, mental, and emotional health? Your sleep cycles, what's happening in them, the root cause of many common issues, especially ones that I see commonly in practice, and natural solutions. So ways to approach these issues from a more holistic perspective. And here's me, Dr. Chelsea Eilts, as I mentioned before. Put it simply, your sleep is how your body, mind, and mood regulate and regenerate. All right, so there are several reasons why sleep is so important from a big picture perspective. But basically, the different cycles of sleep that we'll touch into restore our body. They help with cellular regulation, they help with immune regulation in the earlier parts of sleep. And later parts of sleep, REM sleep, is where we really get into mental regulation, mood regulation, resolving unresolved, emotional tensions that might be with us, really integrating memory from short term to long term, and then regulating those signals of wakefulness for when you wake up in the morning. Essentially is like what sleep is doing for us from more that physical, mental side of things. And ultimately, in this sort of regulation, all of the major command centers of the body are being regulated. And we'll get into those command centers in just a moment. But I wanted to mention as well, with dreams, they can be a tremendous source of inspiration and creativity. So just so you can see everything there. But as I mentioned, these command centers in the body that are being regulated during sleep, so important for, for our energy, metabolism, a hormonal balance. And they are the nervous system, the immune system, and the hormonal system. Can be a little bit chicken or the egg. If there are imbalances in these systems, they can affect sleep. But issues with sleep can also affect all three of these systems directly. And that's important because ultimately, if we had like a command center in the body for the physical health of the body, it's these three. It's these top three. So we want them ultimately each in good balance and homeostasis in order to enjoy good health across the board. So first thing, what's going on with sleep? To understand sleep a little bit better and the rhythms that govern sleep and wakefulness, we're going to start with the circadian rhythm. This is really governed by light, rhythms of light exposure and dark exposure. The pineal gland in the brain is responsible for secreting melatonin, melatonin being the hormone that helps to initiate sleep. If there's struggle falling asleep, we can think, something going off with the serotonin pathway. Serotonin converts into melatonin. So if there's not enough melatonin, oftentimes we'll also see issues with serotonin, mood, for example, not feeling very satisfied in life, things that can cue us into maybe there's something with the serotonin pathway being off. And light is a primary driver of when melatonin is going to be secreted in the course of the evening, which obviously presents issues to us, right? Because we're all exposed to tons of sources of light, not all natural. And so if we want to rewild our system, we want to reconnect with the cycles of nature, controlling our light exposure is one primary way to do that, and it will establish a healthy circadian rhythm. There are also chemicals in the body that govern sleepiness and wakefulness. So, one of the primary chemicals besides melatonin that tell your body it's time to go to bed is something called adenosine. Adenosine is counteracted by caffeine. So, when we take caffeine, it bumps all the adenosine off of its receptors. It binds to those receptors and it keeps adenosine from being able to bind. So you're not able to feel sleepy. And everyone's genetics can dictate like to what degree that binding happens. Some people it affects them less, some people it really affects them a whole lot more. And how fast caffeine's cleared from your system will affect that. But adenosine, it is low first thing in the morning if you had good sleep. And then by the evening time, it'll start to go up and up and up, and it will make you feel sleepy. It'll give you pressure, like, oh my goodness, I have to go to sleep. So ideally, we want adenosine and melatonin to come up in the evening times. What we don't want in the evening time are these chemicals, cortisol and histamine. Now, cortisol being a hormone comes from the adrenal glands. Ideally, it spikes first thing in the morning. Histamine, we think of for allergies, gut infections, troubles there. It is actually a neurotransmitter. It excites the brain and tells you it's time to wake up and be awake, be alert. Ideally, cortisol and histamine will surge first thing in the morning and then slowly come down throughout the day and then be low in the evening time, allowing you to fall asleep. For a lot of people, some sleep disruptions come from spikes of cortisol happening at the wrong time of day. So if you're under a lot of stress, for example, being that cortisol is a primary stress hormone, your cortisol might be a little wonky. It might be low in the morning where you feel tired, hard to get up, hard to get out of bed, feeling really groggy, and then high in the evening where it's like I'm wired and tired, but I can't fall asleep. That usually cues me into some issue with cortisol. Histamine's more problematic for people I find who have issues with leaky gut. Maybe you see it as like digestive issues. Maybe you see it as allergies. Maybe you see it as eczema or skin eruptions, like hives that pop up every time you're stressed. This is where I start to see histamine being more of an issue for people with sleep. And one of the reasons that antihistamines are so helpful for people in falling asleep. If that's you, that's kind of a connection to think, if I want to lower histamine without having to take nightly antihistamines, one of the ways that we can recover this would be to look at the sources of histamine at the root cause. Usually it's gut health and immune regulation, and then correct those. So then histamine levels are naturally lower without having to take an antihistamine, which, fun fact, maybe not so fun if you rely on antihistamines, but nightly Benadryl, studies have shown that taking Benadryl every night for sleep does increase risk of early onset dementia. So just another reason why we kind of want to break that habit of relying on every night Benadryl, every night antihistamines. So circadian rhythm, one of the important things for us to reestablish here is our stress hormone cycle in the day. So healthy regulation of cortisol in the day, healthy regulation of histamine coming from the immune system in the gut, and then healthy regulation of light exposure and darkness exposure. There was an interesting study done by a university in Colorado. It was a small study, but basically they took insomniacs and then sent them out camping off the grid, really far from any artificial light sources. And I think it was within 7 days. Yeah, within a week, they noticed significant increase in the production of melatonin and better overall sleep quality for the participants of the study, which just goes to point like, even if we're just like, oh, I'm just going to scroll a little bit, or oh, I'm just going to have this, a few lights on in the house, these overhead lights that have this light angle where they come into your eyes from a higher level, it signals wakefulness in the body and inhibits the production of melatonin. We'll get into some things that you can do to kind of work with this, but important to note what we want to focus on primarily with sleep, first and foremost, is reestablishing this natural rhythm. Now, to look a little bit about what's happening once you're asleep, we can look at the sleep cycles themselves. So we have non-REM sleep and REM sleep, REM standing for rapid eye movement. And it's in the non-REM sleep where all of the physical restoration happens. And it's about 75% of the time that you're asleep is spent in non-REM for like a healthy, normal sleep cycle. Then about 25% is spent in REM sleep. Now, in the earlier part of the night, REM cycles are really, really short. You'll have only maybe 10 minutes in REM. And then as the evening moves along, why you notice maybe early morning, you have more dream time than in like the earlier part of the evening. Is like with each sleep cycle, you go through non-REM into REM, and then it starts again, non-REM into REM, and it lasts about 90 minutes, a sleep cycle. With each sleep cycle, that duration of REM sleep will get longer and longer and longer. And REM sleep is primarily where mental and emotional integration happens, and where some inspirations come from, of course, in your dream world. Non-REM sleep happens in 3 stages, and they're largely associated with the types of brain waves in each of those stages. In the first stage, there's the brain waves need to slow down. So our normal waking consciousness, like I'm watching a movie, I'm having a conversation, I'm scrolling on the internet, most of the time I'm in beta brain waves, which are pretty rapid. In beta brain waves, my brain is operating very separate from my body. There's not a lot of crosstalk. And in fact, even the sections of my brain are working independently. There's not like a global, cohesive pattern of brain firing in high beta brain waves. And they're kind of rapid. And so it's not conducive for sleep. So oftentimes if you find like, whoa, you stayed up too late, you were like working on a project, maybe you were doing some work on the computer late at night, and then you're like, oh, it's time to go to bed. You go and you lay down, and then you're like, there's no way I can fall asleep. we need to slow down those brain waves in order to fall asleep. So in stage one of non-REM sleep, we move from beta into alpha brainwaves. It's slower. The brain works more as a whole cohesive unit in alpha brainwaves. And we usually feel like a little bit more connected to our body, more connected to our intuition, sources of like creative expression. All of that starts to become more alive in alpha brainwaves. And in stage one, we'll switch between alpha and theta, which is like that meditative place where you start to be like, whoa, it's almost dreamlike from alpha into theta. And alpha is kind of where we'll oscillate in stage one of sleep. And in that place, it allows the body to really relax. The heart rate slows down and the breathing starts to get deeper. That's where people might like jerk awake. It's kind of like, oh, movement in that stage one of non-REM sleep. From there, the body will dip even down from there, still in theta brainwaves with little bursts of activity. And those bursts of activity is your body just processing your memories, processing moving short-term to long-term memory, and just kind of starting to integrate a little bit before we get to REM sleep. Here, the heart rate becomes really stable in the slower state. So sometimes when we're going alpha, theta, it's, there's some variability, but moving into the stage two, it's purely theta brainwaves and the heart rate will start to slow considerably. Any spikes in temperature here, so like hot flashes, can really disrupt this and prevent a person from moving into deeper sleep. So if that's you, we'll get into a little bit about like how hormonal fluctuations, especially in like perimenopause, can affect the cycles of sleep, but definitely something that can be worked with in order to improve sleep. And then from there, so stage one, stage two, stage three of non-REM sleep is where the body then moves into the brain moves into delta waves, which are even slower. And this is a place where growth hormones released. So we really want this deep, slow wave sleep in order for growth hormone to be produced. As we get older, that's a treasure. Growth hormone is a treasure, and it truly helps your body and your tissues to recover and repair. Children can just take it for granted that they have tons of growth hormone circulating in their body. Adults, not so much. This is where we get it. And so if you're not able to get into deep sleep, that can be problematic in terms of literally physical recovery and tissue repair in the night. It's also where a lot of immune cell regeneration happens. Now, I haven't looked into it specifically, but I'd be curious if this is also one of the places where autophagy gets increased in the body. Autophagy being something where your immune cells start to scavenge all of the like zombie cells, all of the cells that are creating a lot of inflammation or not functioning properly. It's our immune system that cleans those up. And I would venture a guess, though I haven't checked it out, that deep, slow wave sleep is where a lot of that happens, especially when you're fasting. So once we've gone through this cycle of non-REM sleep, that's when the brain can move into REM sleep. And actually, the brain waves here resemble wakefulness. Like it's almost like when you're awake, how your brain waves will oscillate. And it's where a lot of emotions are integrated, problems are solved, and where the most vivid dreaming happens. Now, there are some common disruptions that can happen here. So for people with like trouble falling asleep, we might think about melatonin or adenosine being low. Maybe it's from getting into caffeine, maybe too much light exposure, not allowing melatonin to be produced. Could also be disruptions in the serotonin pathway. So whether it's coming from the gut or from the hormones, if you're not making enough serotonin, you won't make enough melatonin. And so that can be low, resulting in trouble falling asleep. Or, as you mentioned before, cortisol and histamine can be high, just preventing the body from being able to fall asleep. That kind of wired and tired feeling's pretty common when that's the issue. For people who wake in the middle of the night, like boom, wide awake, can't fall asleep, nothing, I don't have to pee, I don't, there's no reason why I woke up. Top two things I think about is what's going on with the stress hormone, what's going on with blood sugar. And those two actually work together. So if your last meal of the day, for example, was really early, your blood sugar is going to dip in the night. If it gets too low, Your body uses cortisol, stress hormone, in order to make more sugar available. You have to have a steady stream of sugar in your blood for your brain. It's the only thing that your brain can run off of. So the body will use cortisol spike to stimulate more sugar being pulled out of the liver and put into circulation. So it can happen if you're like fasting and you don't normally fast, you're not used to those prolonged fasting periods. That can happen. Blood sugar can dip too low. Or if you're a person who routinely like skips meals and your meals aren't very regular, that's one thing that can trigger this. Also, if you have a sweet tooth in the evening and you're getting into too many sugary sweets before bed, you'll get an initial spike of blood sugar, but then it'll crash in the night and it will stimulate this burst of cortisol. So, a couple of things to think about there would be maybe trying like a protein or higher fat snack before bed in order to stabilize blood sugar throughout the night and really minimizing refined carbs like in the evening time before going to sleep. Also, with disrupted sleep cycles, we can look at a few different things. So, abnormal light rhythms. So, if we're like just on the screens in the evening time, and then say in the morning, you just want to keep it as dark for as long as possible, this is like the worst thing that you could do for regulating your light rhythms in the day. Um, Also certain substances, like substances that are really common. Everyone loves, a lot of people I work with love their evening glass of wine, sometimes more than a glass. And if that becomes too much of a habit or it's too close to bedtime, usually the sweet spot would be like before more than 2 hours before bedtime, if you're going to have a glass of wine. If it's too close to bed, it can really throw off and disrupt your sleep cycles themselves. So, for example, you will not get into as much deep sleep. So, that place where growth hormones secreted won't happen with too much alcohol in the system. And also, REM sleep gets disrupted as well. So, sometimes, like the emotional processing and integration, and then the physical healing and immune system healing won't happen if wine is like an evening habit too close to bedtime, or there's just too much of it coming into your system, which can result in fragmented sleep where it just kind of feels like, oh, it's like all broken up throughout the night. And then poor physical recovery. Say you did a really hardcore workout and you're like, oh man, I cannot recover, or you pulled an all-nighter. It's like your ability to recover from that is going to be less. Cannabis can result in less REM sleep. Typically, it suppresses REM, though different components, THC, CBD, will promote certain parts of non-REM sleep, which is why we know it can be really helpful for some people for sleep in general, using like CBD gummies, something like this. But over time, the development of you become chemically dependent on it, and then it can start to work less. So usually for people, if they're using CBD gummies for sleep, it's a good idea to use them for a period, take a break, use them for a period, take a break. And ultimately, my recommendation as a functional health specialist would be to go a little bit deeper and figure out why there's an issue to begin with, so you don't rely on the substance every night. Caffeine, as I mentioned before, it reduces the amount of adenosine. So for people, especially if you're caffeine sensitive, if you have any caffeine beyond noon or 2 o'clock, and you notice like, well, I'm not able to sleep or get to sleep really well, it's purely because of that adenosine not being able to bind to its receptors. And really, adenosine is one of those chemicals that drives sleepiness. It helps you to feel sleepy and ready for sleep. They call it sleep pressure. It puts the pressure on to go to sleep. So it'll delay sleep onset if adenosine's low, and then you'll get less of that slow wave sleep if you're overly reliant on caffeine. So some of that physical repair, immune system repair won't happen effectively if you're just getting too much caffeine in your system. Caffeine has a lot of health benefits. It can be really nice and good for your constitution if done appropriately. This is just an example where it's done maybe a little bit too much for your genetics and what you can handle, or at the wrong time of day. With regard to light rhythms, so screens, blue light, again, can disrupt your circadian rhythms and throw things off. Also, for people who work night shifts or flip-flop between night and day shifts, that can be really disruptive to those light rhythms as well. Your body doesn't know what your sleep-wake cycle is, especially if on your days off you try and do a normal schedule. I've seen a lot of nurses and helped a lot of nurses who do this, where you work at night, you're under fluorescent lights all night, and then you get in the habit of just caffeine through the night in order to get through, creating this artificial cortisol burst through the night, blocking adenosine from binding so you don't have that sleep pressure. But then on your couple days off, you want to go back to normal day. This is going to create a really, really wonky melatonin and cortisol rhythm for you. So that's definitely a nuanced situation where maybe it'd be helpful to have a chat directly and talk about. But I mean, there are little hacks that you can use that we'll get into that hopefully can help if that's you. And then, of course, restless sleep can come down to hormones. So, imbalances in the hormones. If estrogen is low, if progesterone is low, if thyroid is low, there will be less production of melatonin. They can also affect, your cortisol. So, typically, when cortisol's high, I usually see progesterone being low for women. So, that can kind of indirectly feed back into reduced melatonin. Cortisol's high, like just reduce melatonin through the hormone pathway. And then again, you can have restless sleep because of blood sugar dips and spikes in the night. Mhm. I made an interesting note from a classical Chinese perspective. It's thought that the different organs of the body, so the different meridians that correspond to your internal organs, are active at different times throughout the day. So there's this correspondences clock in classical Chinese medicine, where different times correspond to different meridians. Between the hours of 11 to 1, which is usually best to be in bed before this time, but between the hours of 11 to 1 correspond to the gallbladder and the element of wood, which is all about movement and flexibility. Um, so issues with indecision or overthinking or even late night snacking can affect and disrupt this meridian. So if you notice you're waking between the hours of 11 p.m. and 1 a.m., like that's where your sleep issues are, something to consider. Maybe a little correspondence to the gallbladder. And is there a little bit of indecision or overthinking that you could journal out and try and get to the bottom of? Between the hours of 1 and 3 a.m. corresponds to the liver meridian, which is kind of like the workhorse in the body where all of our toxins are pulled out. It regulates blood sugar. It does everything for you. Your liver is so important for so many functions. And again, to the element of wood and issues with stress or unresolved fight or flight, as well as just toxicity, right? Because the liver is so responsible for clearing out toxins from the body. The liver and the kidneys are the big ones. So any unresolved issues there, if you find you're waking between 1 and 3 a.m., something to consider, a little food for thought. And then between the hours of 3 and 5, if that's where you're primarily waking up, that corresponds to the meridian of the lung. And the element there is metal, which is all about, like a lot of thinking and discernment and clear judgment. And also aspects of grief can affect this meridian. So for anybody unable to let go of emotional tensions, if there are things that you're just processes that you're grieving or things that you're holding rather tight to there that you're not able to have that full release or exhale, it might show up as some disruption, like just your inner being being a little bit disrupted between the hours of 3 and 5 a.m. So a little bit of just kind of a breakdown of some of the things to really think about in terms of root cause of your sleep issues. And a question to really reflect then is, does your nightly routine support your sleep or hinder it? And really, for me, I think there's no shame in any of this. It's all about awareness. The more we can be aware, then the more we can pick and choose consciously. If you like your night routine that totally screws up your sleep, I mean, there's no reason you can't just keep doing that and also enjoying all the health things that come along with that choice. But for those of us who really want to um, rewild, to balance our bodies and get harmonious with the cycles that nature teaches us, considering your nightly routine can be really helpful in creating a little bit of a wind down. So instead of just going from like Netflix, dealing with the kids, eating some late night snacks, having a glass of wine to like, oh, boom, I need to go to bed. Creating a little bit of conscious transition can be all the change that you need. So, some natural solutions for you. Looking at your environment can be really helpful. So, are there sources of light? Are there little night lights? Is the alarm clock having a glow? Is there, is your phone coming on and off in the night so that you're getting light exposure? I really recommend blackout curtains, especially if you have like outdoor street lights or something that'll trickle in like that diffuse light. It can really disrupt your sleep. I've worked with a few people who used to like fall asleep with the TV on. Again, I think just you're not setting yourself up for the most restful sleep because you're not allowing a healthy secretion of melatonin to set and regulate your circadian rhythm. So getting rid of those late night light sources can be so helpful. And making sure that the room is not too warm can be very helpful. Being overly hot at night can disrupt your sleep. So it's helpful to just be, cozy, warm on your body, but like a nice cool environment for your face so that you can temperature regulate better. So when it comes to that non-REM sleep, moving from stage 2 into stage 3, we really want to get into that deep sleep. Having a cool environment where your temperature can regulate more easily will help you to dip into that really deep restorative sleep. And also, how calm is your sleeping environment? If there's a ton of clutter, whether you're conscious of it or not, your mind is tending to that clutter. If there's just like a bunch of crap everywhere, or there's stuff that feels kind of stressful to you in sight, I recommend just, spending a little bit of time and like making it more conscious, getting rid of those things, clearing things out, cleaning up a little bit so that like it feels serene to your mind when you go in there. There's not a lot in your room that your mind has to tend to, just like nice open space, or at the very least like things that aren't just like piles of clutter everywhere. Super helpful. um Same as clutter would be, like how much noise is coming in. Is there a lot of noise pollution? Is there a lot that your brain is having to attend to? Because all of those noises, whether you're conscious of it or not, your brain is tending to them and responding to them. So reducing noise as best you can, or wearing earplugs if you have a partner who snores, or maybe you're like just in the town and it's loud. I have the benefit of being out in a rural setting, so all I hear is just like sounds of nature, really. But if you're in town, white noise machines can be helpful, something where it's just like really consistent and not a lot of fluctuation that your brain has to attend to. It'll allow your brain waves to slow down with ease. EMFs can also interrupt that slowing of your brain waves. Biggest one that I think of is cell phone. If you're using a cell phone as your alarm clock, do yourself a favor and put it on the airplane mode. Set your alarm, turn it on airplane mode, put it face down so that's like no notifications, nothing is like really just bright and lighting up your space. And then it also mitigates some of the EMF. I've removed any plugs. So for people who are sensitive, removing things that are plugged in right by your head, and like having them, other things plugged in elsewhere in the room is fine, but like within a close proximity to your head, if you have a router, if you have a wireless printer, like all of these things, just turn them off in the night. Do yourself that favor and see for yourself, know for yourself. When you mitigate those things, it's noticeable. Let's see, anything else? Oh, that's about it. Now, in terms of light, creating a rhythm can be super helpful. So, best practice, first thing in the morning when you really want that strong cortisol burst, get out of bed, go outside. Whether you're in a like really sunny, bright environment, or you're in kind of like where I'm at, the Pacific Northwest is not really like a place you want to hang out first thing in the morning, but I'll bundle up, walk straight outside and get that light into your eyes. Light coming from the horizon into your eyes first thing in the morning stimulates a strong cortisol burst. It stimulates that, like it's the setting of that first part of your circadian rhythm where your cortisol and histamine should spike. It helps to facilitate that. Huberman cited that it's 50 times less effective to look through a window or to look through the windshield of your car or out the window. So it really is more effective. You get so many more photons of light, which are the actual like measurable units of light. You get 50 times more if you just go outside 10 minutes, up to 30 minutes, just enough time to just kind of take a few deep breaths, spend a little bit of time outside. That'll really help. And in terms of light, when it comes evening time, ideally you're getting rid of blue light sources and overhead lights. For me, I've experimented with a few different blue blocking lenses, and truly the ones that Huberman helped come up with, Dr. Andrew Huberman, Roca is the brand, but they're stylish and they have great coverage. So I find not a lot of light seeps in around the glasses without having to have those like weird, wing ones. Um, and it filters out more than just blue light, green light spectrum as well. And I've noticed in the last 2 weeks since I tried these ones out, I've tried a few different brands over the years, some that were clear, some that were really dark orange, some and all variations in between. These so far have been my favorite and the most noticeable impact. So when it comes evening time, after basically the sun goes down here, I pop these bad boys on and then just live my life. And I still try and just kind of minimize overhead lighting, use like a little bit more dim lighting. If I'm going to have some screen on, let's be real. I like watching Netflix in the evening with my honey sometimes. I'll try and cut it off an hour before bed and definitely put the blue blockers on. I'll sometimes do a little night shift on the iPad device as well to just minimize and mitigate that blue light exposure in the evening time. And those two things together can really help to create more of that natural light rhythm in the day. Setting yourself up with a routine can be really helpful. So, like a nighttime routine, if you want to soak your feet in a little Epsom salt, get some of that therapeutic magnesium, just start relaxing. Magnesium's nice as a soak because magnesium's job is to dilate blood vessels. So, whether it's on your feet or your whole body, soaking in an Epsom salt bath, it'll dilate the blood vessels and just really relax all of your muscles. So, any tension, any tightness, all of that starts to relax. So sometimes just relaxing the body helps to relax the mind and get you ready for sleep. Journaling in the evening, especially doing brain dumps, because if we think about it, our memories are being integrated and our emotions are being integrated in the night. So if we have a lot of things, like maybe in the day we never stopped or took the time to slow down and process the things that we were going through, if something in the day was really distressing and you never took the time to process it, that's going to come up during sleep. And if it's really distressing, having a little bit of time to just kind of dump it out, dump your emotions, like all of your thoughts and feelings on it, and really get them out of your system and have a little bit of like a purge before bed can be super helpful. I mean, that can be triggering as well. So work with your own, person and what feels best for you in terms of journaling. But, doing a little bit of like a brain dump can be helpful. Also, if you're one of the people who wakes up in the night and you're just like thinking of your to-do list for the next day, like you're just like, I can't stop thinking about all these things I have to do. Also, a really helpful place for journaling in the night. Just write down all of those things that are burdening your mind so that your brain doesn't have to hold on to them. You can say, oh, that's it. I've got that for another time. It's all written down. You can let it go. You can just let it go. If you wake up in the night and you're ruminating and you cannot let it go, turn over, grab your journal, jot those things down, and just be like, roll back. It's all good. I'll deal with it tomorrow in its own time and place. So having that little wind down can be helpful with the journaling, maybe a little bit of magnesium soaks, and yoga nidra. Similar to the guided meditation practice, the guided grounding practice at the beginning of this lesson, tuning into the sensations in your body can help slow your brain waves. It makes you more present. It relaxes your muscles calms your brain waves, calms everything down, and gets you ready for sleep. For a lot of people, yoga nidra is literally all it takes to calm down for sleep. So I highly recommend either using the somatic grounding practice at the beginning of this recording or looking up. There are plenty of free guided yoga nidras on YouTube. Find one for yourself, experience it, and then once you know the flow, you can guide yourself through it. So it's something that you can use in the night if you wake up and you need to fall back to sleep, or it's something that you can use right before bed to help yourself to fall to sleep with ease. Yoga nidra. And let's see, hormones. With regard to hormones, regulating your stress is huge. I personally like to utilize herbs, nootropics, and lifestyle for regulating stress. In my opinion, only 20% of the heavy lifting comes from supplements. The rest comes from lifestyle. So the way that we can best regulate stress is by routinely using somatic practices to get in the body. Stress usually comes as like we have a perceived threat, and then we have a fight or flight, fawn, freeze response in coordination with that threat. When we get into the body, when it doesn't need to be like this, maybe it's not a bear, it's not something we actually have to deal with. Maybe it's just a hard conversation we didn't want to have today, but we were all up in our nerves thinking about it. Getting yourself present can be huge at helping to unwind some of those just exacerbated tensions that come from chronic issues, chronic stressors, so that we're a little bit more present and less future tripping, less past tripping, and able to stay more balanced. Over time, these practices really do reduce baseline stress and help you to feel like you have more capacity in the day. So if a little stressor comes along, it's less likely to take you to like a 10 out of 10 level of stress. And it'll just be little blips. Oh, is this something I need to respond to? Oh, can I take a step back and look at this? That kind of ability to be responsive rather than reactive comes from building capacity on a daily basis. Somatics is great for that. But as we explored with estrogen, progesterone, thyroid hormone levels, insulin levels, blood sugar related, looking at melatonin secretion, other hormones can regulate sleep and affect sleep. And that's the place where a little bit deeper functional lab analysis can be extremely helpful. So in my world, we don't guess, we test. And testing can help us to discover what truly is the root cause if sleep issues are coming from hormones. And when it comes to herbs, I love herbs. I love herbs for supporting sleep. As we explored with our tasty moon nectar, 3 different classes of herbs are incorporated into this tasty beverage. The first class of herbs are called nervine herbs. Nervines, just like they sound, calm the nerves. And specifically, they calm that fight or flight part of the nervous system, the sympathetic nervous system. It calms it down, slows it down. So a few examples of common sleep herbs that fall in this category: lemon balm, tastes nice and lemony, lavender, skullcap, chamomile, all would fall into this class of nervine herbs. So with passion flower, California poppy, hops, they're also nervines, but they are special in that they fall into this category called hypnotics. Hypnotics help put our mind in that almost like that theta brainwave state where it's really conducive to falling asleep. Passion flower is one of my go-tos for that. I love it because it's safe for children. It's a really safe, beautiful herb. It's floral, it's nice. The taste blends well with other things. So passion flower is one that I'll use as a capsule, as a tincture, as a tea. Teas are easy. Usually it's a teaspoon of herb to a cup of boiling water. Steep it 10 minutes, strain it out. It's kind of like a little quick and dirty for herbs as tea. And the hypnotics, yeah, combining one or more of these can help to initiate sleep with better ease. And then the adaptogens. So for, people with trouble falling asleep, maybe the nervine hypnotic makes a little bit more sense. the people with this really restless sleep in the night, the adaptogens can be quite helpful. They help to, over time, it's not going to be instant with these guys. With the adaptogens, a little bit slower, but more potent effect over time. They start to mitigate stress response. So it starts to slow down how quickly you go from a stressor and a reaction to being like, oh, a stressor and a response. And this ultimately helps you to have slow, steady energy, not just quick bursts of energy that throughout the day. In our moon nectar, we use tulsi, which is holy basil, but also things like ashwagandha, reishi can be quite helpful as adaptogens. Nootropics, so different other supplement forms of things to support sleep. Top of the list, L-theanine can be really helpful. It's really nice for reducing stress response. It's thought to increase your levels of serotonin, so melatonin, and GABA. GABA is the only neurotransmitter that slows things down. It puts the brakes on in your brain. So L-theanine helps to boost both of those things and is really calming. Flavonoids, they come from plants, um, are different components that usually they'll support GABA production, and there a certain flavonoids also are really helpful for reducing brain inflammation. So something we haven't mentioned so far that can disrupt sleep is inflammation in the brain. Whether you've had past head trauma, which is a big source of chronic, ongoing brain inflammation, or you're getting into things that are toxic for the brain. Maybe you have some built up toxicity in your tissues. You haven't done a good cellular detox. Maybe you're on a really inflammatory diet, or maybe you're dealing with an autoimmune condition. If levels of inflammation climb in the brain, it can make it to where the brain's not functioning appropriately. Brain waves are more rapid in those cases. Flavonoids can help slow that down. The biggest ones that have the highest affinity for the brain are apigenin and luteolin. Also, hesperidin and quercetin are pretty popular as flavonoids specifically to support the brain and sleep cycles. Inositol is a really nice product that can be used for controlling blood sugar regulation through the night. It helps to stabilize blood sugar at doses usually about 1 gram to 2 grams in a day. Inositol, myo-inositol is the more readily absorbed form that can be quite helpful for sleep. And then lastly, that made the list is magnesium. Typically, I'll go for forms glycinate or threonate. Threonate is the only form of magnesium able to cross the blood-brain barrier, so it can be helpful in that sense. Bisglycinate is also well absorbed. One product I've enjoyed in the past is by a company called Jarrow, called Calming Day, and it combines L-theanine, inositol, and magnesium in one little drink powder. That's something I've used in the evening and seen really good results with. Sometimes people, though, prefer to get these all separate and then just take them as separate supplements to really just key in on what's most helpful. And then biohacks, things that we can do lifestyle wise to really help restore sleep is that morning light. You get out of bed, you just have like a quick little sequence. I get out of bed, I throw on my robe or my jacket, and then hop outside for a good 5-10 minutes. Get that morning light in the eyes. You can also, after, if you do a little bit of morning activity, exercise can be helpful for stimulating a cortisol burst. For me, I like to jump on the rebounder. It helps with daily detox, but also helps to just get the blood flowing. Sometimes I'll do weightlifting, sometimes yoga, sometimes a little jump rope in the morning, but getting just the blood pumping can help to boost your cortisol response in the morning. And then following it up with a contrast shower. Not for the faint of heart, but finishing up a warm shower with 30 to 60 seconds of cold water. The most effective place, get it on the face, get it on the chest, at the very least. Get it on your face, get it on your chest, that cold water. But I'll get it all over my whole body and get a little shiver response going because it boosts your metabolism like crazy. So a little contrast shower, also another little biohack to get that morning cortisol burst. So if you're one of those people who's wired and tired at night, groggy in the morning, these are things specifically to help normalize your rhythm. And then again, in the evenings, pop on a pair of those blue blockers if you're going to have lights on, or go, like just really dim, low light, and start your wind down early so that you can get that normal, regulated cortisol low, melatonin, and adenosine high in the evening. And that is basically it. Let me see any other things here. Any questions from you guys for specific things that we can do to support sleep? Okay. Well, if no questions, I do want to mention one thing. As a functional health provider, I have helped a number of people, hundreds of people at this point, to regulate sleep and also address the root issues of sleep. Sometimes these can be nuanced, they can be a little tricky to try and navigate. Maybe you have multiples going on. So, really being able to suss out what specifically is going on, and then how can we create a step-by-step game plan to address these issues in a way that will last, and then create the lifestyle that will keep those changes in place simply, easily. That's where working with a functional provider can be quite helpful. So, if that's you, if you're interested in exploring a little bit deeper, I do offer a 6-month one-on-one high touch program called Resilient by Nature, where I create exactly a game plan based on your labs, your lifestyle, your goals, and a whole plethora of functional lab testing. So I will leave a link to details about that program in the description field below. You're welcome to pop on a quick discovery call where we can put together a personalized health strategy for you, and then determine if you're a good fit for the program. If I have space and you're a good fit, it would be an opportunity to be invited into that program. Otherwise, I'm so grateful to have had you tonight. I hope that all of this is very helpful for you. I'd love to hear in the comments section below if there are any key takeaways that you've got, any big aha moments that you had, anything that you want to see more of in the future, like unanswered questions that weren't answered. Feel free to pop them down below. I'd love to start up a little bit of dialogue and help you out. All right. Goodbye and good night.